Luxury used to sell a simple promise: pay more, get more. Better leather, better hardware, better finishing, better service, better resale, better longevity. What changed is that a lot of shoppers no longer feel that promise is automatic. In this video, we are looking at 15 brands people increasingly say are not worth it anymore, not because luxury is dead, but because price jumps started outrunning the feeling of value. This matters right now because the whole sector is under pressure. Bain says personal luxury goods slipped from about 364 billion euros in 2024 to about 358 billion euros in 2025, while McKinsey says luxury entered 2025 facing a real slowdown after years of easy pricing power. Bain also warned that years of aggressive price hikes alienated shoppers and shrank the customer base. So by the end of this, you will know what to look for before you confuse prestige with plain old markup. Valentino comes in at number 15 because it still has huge runway prestige, huge red carpet presence, and huge history. But that does not always translate into everyday value for ordinary buyers standing in front of a bag, a shoe, or a jacket with a shocking price tag. This is one of those houses where the aura can do a lot of the work. The problem is that aura does not hold your strap together, does not make a leather feel magically better, and does not make a seasonal piece easier to wear 5 years later. Reuters reported Valentino's operating profit fell 22% in 2024, and later reported that the slowdown in demand was serious enough to raise questions around valuation and momentum. That matters because when a brand is fighting softer demand, buyers stop being polite and start asking rude but fair questions. Is this object truly special, or is it just benefiting from the glow of couture? A lot of people now look at Valentino and see a brand that still knows how to stage desire, but not always a brand that makes the strongest day-to-day case for the money. That is the theme you're going to hear again and again tonight. Luxury gets in trouble when people admire the image more than they trust the purchase. Dolce & Gabbana lands at number 14, because this is what overpricing looks like when a brand's fantasy stays loud, but its business reality gets quieter. Reuters reported recently that Dolce & Gabbana posted a net loss of 143 million euros in its 2024 to 2025 fiscal year and has been dealing with debt refinancing pressure. At the same time, major retailers are still listing plenty of its handbags in the rough range of $2,000 to $3,500. That is where the pushback starts. Buyers can forgive a lot when a brand feels culturally unstoppable. They forgive louder logos. They forgive less practical shapes. They even forgive impulse purchases. What they do not forgive forever is paying peak luxury money for a label that no longer feels like the obvious center of the conversation. Dolce & Gabbana still has craftsmanship, still has a very clear visual identity, and still has fans who love the drama. But many shoppers now see the brand as charging for old glamour at a moment when the market is rewarding precision, restraint, and products that feel less costume-like. In plain English, people do not want to feel like they paid a premium just to wear the idea of luxury. They want the item itself to do the talking. Canada Goose takes number 13, and this one is important because the complaint is not that the product is fake or flimsy. In fact, Canada Goose still has a real manufacturing story. The company says nearly all of its down-filled outerwear is made in Canada, and more than 90% of those products are made directly in its own facilities. Its fiscal 2025 revenue was about 1,348 million Canadian dollars. So this is not some tiny niche player pretending to be premium. But the value debate has gotten much sharper because the Expedition parka on the brand's own site is listed at $1,895. That number changes how people think. At that point, shoppers start comparing the coat not only to other luxury coats, but to high-performance outerwear from technical brands, to better layering systems, and even to the simple fact that many winters do not require that much coat. Canada Goose built its mystique on extreme weather credibility, but once the badge became a status symbol, the pricing conversation changed from function to fashion. And when that happens, people start asking whether they are paying for warmth or paying for the patch. A lot of them now think the patch got too expensive. Moncler comes in at number 12 for a similar but slightly trickier reason. Moncler is not struggling the way some other brands are. The Moncler brand generated about 2,720 million euros in revenue in 2025, up 3%. And Reuters said the company expected price increases from production inflation. On the product side, Moncler's own site lists the iconic Moncler Maya hooded short down jacket at $1,950. So the brand is clearly still in demand. But this is exactly why the criticism matters. When a glossy nylon puffer gets close to $2,000, people stop evaluating it like a jacket and start evaluating it like a symbol. Moncler mastered the move from mountain utility to city status. That was brilliant. But it also means a lot of customers now believe they are paying luxury fashion money for a piece that makes its biggest impact from silhouette, shine, and logo recognition, not from some giant leap in utility. Moncler may still be desirable. That is not the same as universally feeling worth it. A brand can win the market and still lose the value argument. Those are two different fights. Burberry takes number 11 because it shows how quickly buyers push back when a heritage house wanders too far from the products that built trust in the first place. Burberry's own key performance indicators show that revenue at constant exchange rates fell 15% in fiscal 2024 to 2025, and comparable store sales fell 12%. Reuters also reported that Burberry had to refocus on outerwear and scarves, with its chief executive saying customers had been alienated by less recognizable designs and higher prices. Reuters even pointed to cashmere scarves priced from about £420 to £990. That is the whole story in one snapshot. Burberry works best when it feels like British outerwear authority. The trench, the scarf, the weatherproof polish. When it drifts into generic luxury fashion with luxury fashion pricing, the spell weakens. And when shoppers sense that even the company itself is running back toward its core icons, they notice. They think, wait, if the brand is telling me the trench and the scarf are the safe bets, why was I paying up for all the other stuff? Burberry is not a dead brand, far from it. But it is one of the clearest examples of how overpricing and identity drift can show up at the same time. Balenciaga sits at number 10 because this brand became the poster child for a dangerous luxury habit, charging ever more for irony, provocation, and deliberate awkwardness, then acting surprised when people ask where the actual value lives. Balenciaga has extraordinary history. Kering's own profile of the house reminds people that Cristobal Balenciaga was revered for technical perfection and radical shape. But modern Balenciaga trained customers to treat absurdity itself as the premium feature. That works for a while. It generates headlines. It creates instant recognition. It makes people feel like they are buying into the joke before everyone else gets it. Then the mood changes. Suddenly, shoppers are less interested in paying giant sums to look like they bought the joke after everyone else got it. What makes this more interesting is that Balenciaga has not vanished. Kering's first quarter update showed the brand still benefiting from stronger women's wear and successful handbags. So the issue is not survival. The issue is fatigue. A growing number of people think Balenciaga crossed the line where fashion experimentation stopped feeling rare and started feeling like a pricing strategy. Once customers suspect that, they become much harsher judges. Yves Saint Laurent takes number 9 because this is the brand many people still love looking at, even while quietly backing away from the register. Saint Laurent remains one of the sharpest labels in luxury. It knows evening. It knows black. It knows sleek. It knows how to make a campaign look expensive before you even see the item. But the price ladder got steep. On the brand's own site, the Le 5A7 in smooth leather is listed at $2,500, the supple small version at $2,750, and the large version at $3,200. Meanwhile, Kering reported that Yves Saint Laurent's revenue for 2025 was about €2,600 million, down 6% on a comparable basis. That does not prove the bags are bad. It proves the market got more selective. And Saint Laurent is one of the best examples of a house that can look perfect on the arm, yet still trigger a basic consumer question. Am I paying for leather and construction, or am I paying for the mood board? A lot of buyers now think the answer is the second one. They still admire the style. They just do not want to subsidize it at every price point anymore. Prada comes in at number 8 because it shows how a brand can execute brilliantly and still make people feel the price stretch. Prada Group posted very strong full-year 2025 results, with retail sales above €5 billion and total revenues up 9%. Yet Prada, the brand itself, was basically flat to slightly down in retail sales, even as the group stayed strong overall. On the product side, Prada's own site now lists popular Galleria bags around $4,400, $4,700, and even $5,000 depending on size and version. The Wall Street Journal reported that the Galleria was about 85% more expensive than in 2019. That is a huge jump, and it helps explain the mood. Prada still has real design language. It still has history. It still has the rare ability to make nylon feel like high fashion. But that last point is also the controversy. People can admire the intelligence of the brand and still question whether the material story and the final object justify the price. When customers start talking about Prada this way, they are not saying it is cheap looking. They are saying the premium now feels more strategic than earned. That is a very different insult. And for luxury houses, it can sting even more. Versace lands at number 7 because the brand's recent numbers make the value debate impossible to ignore. Capri said Versace's fourth quarter fiscal 2025 revenue was $208 million, down more than 20% on both a reported and constant currency basis, and that the brand swung to an operating loss. Soon after, Prada agreed to buy Versace for roughly $1,400 million after a period of visible underperformance, while Reuters reported that Donatella Versace was stepping aside from her long-held creative role. Here is why buyers care. Versace built itself on heat, gold, shine, Medusa hardware, loud confidence. That can be fantastic when the culture is hungry for excess. But when the market turns picky, conspicuous glamour can suddenly feel like the easiest place to spot a markup. Consumers begin to wonder whether they are paying for exceptional product or just paying to wear a familiar fantasy from a louder era. Versace still has major identity, maybe more than most brands on this list. The problem is that identity can become a trap when it stops evolving faster than the price. Once that happens, people do not just ask whether it is beautiful. They ask whether it feels expensive in the right way. Increasingly, many say no. Rolex takes number 6. And this one is different because Rolex is still stronger than most luxury brands by almost any market measure. That is exactly why the frustration is so revealing. The complaint is not that Rolex makes bad watches. The complaint is that buying one can feel absurd. The Wall Street Journal reported that American buyers were paying about 14% more for a yellow gold Daytona than they did in 2024 after watch price increases. The same paper also reported that shoppers were willing to pay nearly 30% more for used watches certified by Rolex itself. Meanwhile, Hodinkee, citing Morgan Stanley and Watch Charts data, said Rolex was the only major watch brand whose secondary market prices posted gains on both an annual and quarterly basis in that report. So yes, Rolex still holds value better than most, but that is also the problem. Scarcity theater, dealer games, and the strange normalization of paying more for access than for the object itself have left a lot of buyers cold. When people say Rolex is not worth it anymore, they usually are not attacking the watch. They are attacking the ritual around the watch. And once the buying experience starts feeling like a status obstacle course, even a great product can begin to feel overpriced. Omega comes in at number 5 because it may be the clearest example of a beloved luxury brand that many shoppers now respect more on the secondary market than at full retail. That sounds harsh, but look at the tension. Swatch Group highlighted strong United States momentum for Omega in the first half of 2025, with the brand named among those growing by between 10 and 30% in that market. At the same time, Watch Chart says the most popular Omega Seamaster model it tracks has an estimated market value of about $4,331, and the most popular Speedmaster reference it tracks sits around $6,500. Compare that to Omega's White Dial Speedmaster Moonwatch launch in 2024, which Wired reported at $8,100. This is where the conversation shifts. People love Omega's history. They love the Moonwatch story. They love James Bond links, tool watch credibility, and the finishing. What they question now is the sticker. A lot of buyers have realized they can get much of the same emotional payoff by buying pre-owned, buying almost new, or simply refusing the newest price step. That does not mean Omega lost its soul. It means the market got honest about what it wants to pay. And that honesty is exactly what makes a brand feel not worth it to more people. even when they still admire it. Gucci lands at number 4 because it may be the clearest fashion case of what happens when prices climb while brand identity wobbles. Kering reported that Gucci's revenue for 2025 was about 6 billion euros, down 19% on a comparable basis. Reuters reported just yesterday that first quarter 2026 sales fell another 8% year-over-year. Even more bluntly, Reuters said Gucci's sales had halved under the previous era amid high prices, inconsistent aesthetics, and management changes. That is brutal, and it goes straight to the value issue. Gucci was once one of the easiest brands to justify in status terms because it felt like the center of the room. The loafers, the bags, the belts, the maximalism, then the retro turn, then the chaos. It was hot. And when a brand is hot, people rationalize prices that would otherwise feel silly. But heat is not the same as trust. When customers began to feel that the design language kept changing while the sticker never came back down, the patience ran out. Gucci is now trying to rebuild product momentum and narrative clarity. That is good. But the brand's recent numbers show how unforgiving consumers become when they suspect that the price kept behaving like the magic was still there, even after the magic had cooled. Dior takes number 3 because Dior became one of the clearest symbols of luxury's post-pandemic pricing ambition. The Wall Street Journal reported that selected key Dior products rose about 51% between 2020 and 2023, far above what most normal shoppers would call reasonable inflation. Business of Fashion reported the same Bernstein analysis. Reuters has also noted that luxury houses, including Dior, are now trying to find better alignment between prices and product value, and that doing so will take time. That is the key phrase, better alignment. In other words, even the industry knows the gap got too wide. Dior still knows how to sell aspiration better than almost anyone. The problem is that aspiration now arrives with more skepticism. Beautiful store, beautiful campaign, beautiful box. But many buyers are looking at the actual product and wondering whether the jump in craftsmanship really matched the jump in price. They are also wondering whether the brand's heavy reliance on image, celebrity, and constant desirability has trained them to pay for momentum rather than substance. That question gets louder when the whole industry slows down, because a slowdown strips away the flattering excuses. It forces buyers to inspect the item instead of the dream. And for more people now, that inspection ends with one simple conclusion. Dior may still be gorgeous, but it no longer automatically feels worth what Dior wants. Louis Vuitton takes number 2 because this is the brand that most people think of when they think of modern luxury pricing power. It is huge, it is global, it is durable, it is still wildly desired. But it also helped teach the market that people would keep paying more and more for the comfort of a familiar monogram. On Louis Vuitton's own United States site, the Neverfull MM is now listed at $2,940. That is a coated canvas tote with leather trim, not some rare hand-stitched exotic masterpiece. Reuters reported that brands like Louis Vuitton, Chanel, and Dior relied heavily on hefty price hikes during the post-pandemic boom, and that as prices rose, shoppers began to turn away. The broader luxury industry lost tens of millions of customers as price fatigue set in. This is where the Louis Vuitton criticism gets very specific. A lot of buyers still believe the brand's best leather goods, trunks, and travel pieces can justify a premium. What they no longer automatically accept is the idea that iconic entry products deserve almost unlimited upward repricing just because the logo is famous and the demand was strong last year. When a monogram canvas tote starts feeling like a financial decision instead of a bag decision, people notice. That is why Louis Vuitton is still powerful, still admired, and yet increasingly central to the claim that luxury pushed its luck too far. Chanel is number 1 because Chanel has become the cleanest, loudest shorthand for luxury overpricing. Chanel's own financial release says revenue for 2024 fell 4.3% to $18.7 billion, while operating profit fell 30%. Reuters reported that Chanel's small classic handbag in France rose from 4,550 euros in November 2019 to 7,750 euros by March 2022. Then later reporting, again using Bernstein analysis, said selected key Chanel products rose roughly 59% between 2020 and 2023. That is why Chanel sits at the top. Not because the brand has no craft, not because people do not still want it, not because the history is fake. Chanel is number one because it showed the whole industry just how far a major house could push pricing before ordinary admiration turned into open disbelief. And once that disbelief spreads, it sticks. Buyers start noticing every stitch, every queue, every service detail, every hardware scratch, every resale haircut, every tiny disappointment. The brand that once felt like the safest luxury fantasy starts getting judged like any other purchase. That is a dangerous moment for a house built on mystique. Chanel may remain one of the most important luxury names in the world. But it is also the brand most often invoked when people say luxury forgot the difference between exclusivity and excess. And that is the bigger lesson in all of this. Luxury does not become not worth it only when quality collapses. It becomes not worth it when the story, the service, the resale reality, the design consistency, and the material truth stop moving in step with the price. Resale is growing much faster than first-hand fashion, and surveys show affordability is now one of the biggest reasons people shop second-hand. That tells you exactly where the mood is. People still want beautiful things. They just do not want to be played. So before you buy, look past the campaign. Ask what the item is made of, how often the house resets its identity, whether the price has run way ahead of the market, and whether you are buying craftsmanship or just buying permission to participate in a status script. If this hit a nerve, like the video, comment with the one luxury brand you think fell off the hardest, and share this with someone who still thinks expensive automatically means worth it.